Hello, my name is Colin Mulron, and today we'll be taking a look at Avanade as an organization. So to start us off, who is Avanade? They are a tech consultancy that provides technical solutions to other organizations. Their two parent companies, Accenture, a larger tech consultancy, and Microsoft came together and said, what if there was a tech consultancy that focused specifically on the Microsoft suite of tools, things like Office 365 and other lesser known Microsoft business technical solutions? So they created Avanade. Avanade is a 20-year-old multinational organization that, again, focuses specifically on the Microsoft suite of tools and creating solutions from other companies stemming from those. My perspective would be that of a user experience junior analyst. Do not worry, we will unpack that towards the end of the presentation. Essentially, this position researches customers, the users of Avanade's clients, to find their pain points and needs. They'll also design interfaces and encode empathy into their designs, meaning that since they are interviewing, conducting focus groups with, and workshops with users, real human people, they have to empathize with their needs and create solutions that aim to help them with said needs. I would be working in the Chicago, Illinois office, which is located in the Central Division, otherwise known as the Midwest Division of Avanade, within the Innovation Studio, which is a place in the Chicago office where designers and employees of all different departments can come together and collaborate and discuss their past experiences in order to create better work for Avanade. Real quick, before we get too much farther into the weeds, UX design, user experience design, is not, in fact, web design. Web design, while focused on, catch this, designing websites, is different from user experience design, which is a much broader term applied to designing all kinds of experiences from users, whether that be Disney trying to design for their park goers, or Kroger trying to get people to buy different types of foods by rearranging their aisles or designing a different layout for the store. All these kinds of things can be done by a user experience designer. So the organizational profile will consist of what drives this company, what are their motivational factors, what processes they go through, where I will walk you through a typical contract handoff from a client to Avanade, any ongoing issues I have perceived and what might be done about them, as well as my perspective, quote-unquote, hot take of whether or not I think this company would be a good fit for me. So to start with their motivations, Avanade markets heavily their human-centered approach. This is an approach where designers or anybody creating a solution for another company will make sure that users are at the focus of said design, making sure their needs are being met. Otherwise, what is the point of any of this? Miller would describe Avanade as having an open system. They not only communicate between different Avanade offices, but also with two external stakeholder groups, their clients and any users they're designing for. Avanade, trying to nurture an environment of diverse perspectives, trying to lead to diverse design solutions, takes civility and workplace socializing and trying to keep all of that clean and inoffensive is a high priority for them, making sure that people are being civil within the workplace and that any of these discussions, which sometimes can get somewhat emotional, are not something that is a detriment to the company. Also, if you can see Microsoft sneaking in here, that is indicative of the secondary sort of not really marketed motivation for Avanade, and that is to showcase the power of the Microsoft suite of tools. Microsoft loves this. They have given Avanade multiple different awards, over a dozen different Microsoft Partner of the Year awards, because Avanade does a great job of showcasing the power of Microsoft's solutions. So, what happens when a client approaches Avanade and says, hey, can you do XYZ for me? Well, it isn't quite as simple as that. First, the client needs to meet with Avanade, or vice versa in some cases, and needs need to be identified. What are the needs of the clients? What are they trying to do? What problems are they having? We need to propose a contract and set boundaries, expectations for success, goals that we can meet. Throughout this process, Avanade practices heavy corporate social responsibility. Although their ethics aren't necessarily what drives the organization to function, it is something that they take very seriously. Avanade, unless there is something terrible going on behind the scenes that next to nobody knows about, is not a company you are going to see in the news undergoing some big scandal anytime soon. For UX designers and my position specifically, dark patterns is also something we want to avoid. This is a term in UX for trying to essentially trick the user or manipulate them to do something that is negative for them and possibly positive for you. This is heavily frowned upon and is in many cases actually grounds for termination. Avanade, being a multidisciplinary company, needs throughout this entire process communicate to their different internal stakeholders, their software engineers, computer engineers, graphic designers, user experience designers. All of these people need to be communicated with and brought on board for a project before the contract is finished being signed, before the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. This helps operations flow more smoothly, as anything that's hectic that needs to get out of the way can be done before the contract is signed. So the first problem that I encountered during my time there was so bad that even an intern like me was told about this in an open meeting with my managers and peers. Once upon a time, the management was absolute garbage. There was inconsistent decision making. People didn't feel like they were being informed correctly. They didn't know what the standards were for being promoted. They didn't know how to please their management at all. They also encountered a trickle-down communication style. This is something that, unless somebody has already coined this term and has a definition for it, I'm unaware of that. This is something largely referring to other departments hearing about things, information being passed down to the management from upper management, and not being passed to the workers. This was infuriating for the people working in this environment because they would hear about things from other departments before their management even told them. I suggest that the new leadership try to regain the trust of their employees, they did when I was there, by employing underscore and explore. I would like Avanade to take the opportunity within these situations, any situation where, whether that be someone having to be terminated, which happened while I was there, or just a change in the organizational structure, all of this needs to be openly discussed with the employees. There was a great deal of rapport and camaraderie between the management and employees when I was there, and they should capitalize on this by having open meetings, possibly even during their happy hours or other quote-unquote silly meeting times. Framing here is also critical. Being in a siloed organization, sometimes people will hear about things before the management tells them, sometimes they won't. Either way, the management has to frame any developments well, otherwise that's going to affect how the employees perceive them. Something negative, like the termination, was turned into something positive through the power of framing, being told about it in the right ways, the certain types of information being released, respecting the person who this whole subject was about. All of these things build a better sense of trust and rapport between the management and their team. Next, of course, so many work environments are being impacted by COVID-19. Disconnectedness from others and a shared physical space has had a very visible impact on morale. Recruiting was hectic. At the time, although this will change going forward and should change going forward, at the time I was being hired as an intern, they didn't even know whether or not they'd have an internship program, which was understandable, but they also changed my phone meeting times on 5 separate occasions for the first phone meeting and for the second. Not fun. I feel like the strongest suit of Avanade is once you're in the company and talking to the other employees. Everyone seems to be having a good time and is always willing to help another employee. They should capitalize on this. Although recruiting is a bit hectic at the moment, that has to do with a lot of different factors, which are hard to address with any single sweeping solution. One thing that can be done to retain said interns after they've been hired is building connections through a sort of remote work-life balance mentorship. What this means isn't a mentorship specifically necessarily for your work practices and growing as an employee, but a mentorship that helps new employees balance their work and their life. This is something that Avanade, as well as many other companies, preach, and something I could have really used, especially during a remote internship. So my take is, I think I would love to work in this organization and I'd be a good fit for it. In fact, I have accepted a full-time offer for these reasons. I believe that they make it easier for employees to talk to their superiors. This is something I've always had a problem with. Referencing the Montreal School, capital D discourse, the overall themes of discussions that are being had within a company, as well as the actual words coming out of people's mouths, all help to reassure me that this is an open and honest place for real discussions to happen. They also practice transformative leadership, something called bench time. When an employee is not specifically assigned to a client's project, sometimes they have a week or even up to a month to develop their skills, get certifications, shadow other employees, and learn some more about their skill sets. All of these things are possible during this time. As well as professional mentorship, something I touched upon earlier, and branching career paths. So, what the heck is a junior UX whatever analyst thing? Well, a user experience junior analyst is an entry-level UX employee. There aren't necessarily different kinds of UX employees within Avanade, just a linear upwards progression, although there are different disciplines out there. This position involves heavy collaboration. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the things talking with the users, meetings with users, interviews, focus groups, things like that. You need to be able to have discussions and not necessarily shoot down somebody's idea, but work it into the greater design if you think it's applicable. And that's something that you can decide by having conversations with your teams and with your users. You do need to monitor your UX jargon. As you can see here, there were several things I had to define. It can get far worse than this, trust me. This is something you have to make sure that you're limiting in conversations with other people, and especially in a multidisciplinary organization like Avanade, people aren't going to have the same terminology as you. Ethical gatekeeping. This does not mean gatekeeping the idea of ethics and only we can have them, but no, the UX designers are the last and first bastion for making sure that any design or solution is adhering to Avanade's ethics and the ethics of UX practice in general. They're also ambassadors of Avanade, as they go all over the country to present their solutions pre-COVID, and now they're still presenting, albeit through Zoom calls, their solutions to companies all over the world. So in doing so, are a direct representative of Avanade as an organization. Quick takeaways, since I went over time. Avanade is doing well. They have a lot of future growth prospects, even despite COVID. They have simple, achievable goals, provide the power of Microsoft to other organizations by designing solutions for their problems. And much of their communication is internal and external, which I think is exciting because you get to talk to people outside the organization regularly, which gives you a quote-unquote breath of fresh air. And of course, within Avanade, there's always room for growth, and not only do they expect that, but they help provide that. So with that being said, this has been a look at Avanade as an organization. Thank you for listening.